Hi everybody, it's Susan and I'm back to talk about specifically about the Pisces lunar eclipse. It's coming up. It's a total eclipse, which means that it's the moon and the sun are very close to the nodal axis. And it's going to be on the 7th of September. I'm doing this on the 1st of September, so Saturn has only just moved back into the sign of Pisces, so it's at 29:59 as I'm doing this video. But it won't have moved very far because Saturn is moving very slowly as it's retrograding. So we have an eclipse at 15 degrees of Pisces, 15 degrees, 22 minutes of Pisces. And that means it's in opposition to the sun, which is at 15 degrees of Virgo and 22 minutes of the degree. So it's interesting to look for that placement in your chart, especially if you have an exact conjunction, you will feel this for sure. And even if you have a conjunction to within, say, 3 to 5 degrees, we're looking for a conjunction ideally, because that's usually where things are very specifically happening. That means that you will have something in Pisces at that degree, but also the opposition is very strong, especially for a full moon, because the sun is at that degree. And then you can go to the squares, which are also going to show up in some way, shape, or form in your life. So you're looking for 15 to, let's call it 13, probably to 20 degrees of either Gemini or Sagittarius. So in that order. So generally speaking, when there's a trine to an eclipse, things might change, but it won't be as obvious, let's say, or it won't be as impactful as if you have an actual conjunction. Those are the most powerful, life-changing things. And again, in this case, with the full moon, it can be a conjunction in Pisces or in Virgo. I want to tell you a little bit about the lunar family. That's always an interesting thing in terms of moon phases. And this lunar family began in 2024. So on March the 10th, we had a new moon, and that began this phase that this moon is culminating, because full moons are like a culmination phase. Things are coming to your awareness, or things are brought to your understanding, brought even to a conclusion, and then they start to taper off into the next cycle. So if you can go back in time, feels like centuries ago, but it was only a year and a half ago, where you go back to the 10th of March of 2024. And that was happening at 20 degrees. How many minutes? Let's see. 20 degrees and 16 arc minutes of Pisces. And so again, that will be affecting this range, especially where the North Node is currently at 18 degrees of Pisces. And if you go back to the 8th of December, 2024, so 9 months ago, you will have had the first quarter square, the first quarter moon, which is the opening square of the lunation cycle. And that was happening on the 8th of December, and that was 17 degrees and 2 arc minutes of Pisces. So you can again keep looking at the same place in your chart where this message keeps getting repeated. So that will have been a challenge to what you're doing with this energy. And then since that moment in December, there's been something that you're culminating coming up now in September. The third quarter square will be next year, so the 8th of June, 2026. And that's going to be also in Pisces, of course, and that is at 17 degrees and 38 arc minutes of Pisces. So we're looking at the same range here. And again, I'm giving it kind of a margin of 2 to 3 degrees. Keep it tight to really see something happening. Let's say 13 to 20 degrees of Pisces. And again, through opposition to Virgo, or by square to Gemini and Sagittarius. But beyond that, you're not going to really see the results so strongly unless you really have something personal showing up there. That's been my experience anyway. Tell me if you have noticed things otherwise. The difference between the conjunctions, opposition, and squares is that there's a challenge to the way things are showing up, and there's a huge change. Whereas with the trine, it's kind of like, yeah, this would be nice, I'll go in that direction, or things can happen in a way that doesn't feel so confronting. Same with the sextile. And also that we had the very first lunar eclipse in this particular cycle once the nodes moved into the Pisces and Virgo axis, and that was last July of 2024. We had our very first eclipse last September, and that was on the 7th, and sorry, the 7th of September. No, it wasn't. It was the 18th of September. And that was at 25 degrees 40 arc minutes of Pisces. So at that point, what's happening now is that Saturn retrograded in that September eclipse at exactly the point at the 15-degree mark where we find the moon today. So this story of Saturn coming back just a week before, less than a week before this eclipse, coming back into Pisces, like the scene of the crime, coming back into Pisces, while the moon is going to be eclipsed at the same degree that Saturn was in the very first eclipse of this particular cycle of, the eclipse cycle lasts in this little grouping about a year and a half to 2 years. Um, that's interesting to think about as well, because this again marks that 15-degree point really, really strongly in your chart. And again, you can give it an orb of 3, maybe even up to 5 degrees to really see what's going on, especially if you have, of course, the personal planets, your sun, moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, any of your inner planets really significantly, a little bit less significantly, the outer planets. You again for things that are beyond that, the minor planets or the asteroids that might show up in a very specific way in your life. But there you want a really tight orb, 1 to 2 degrees, not giving a huge margin for the minor planets and asteroids. Um, and then, of course, also if it's your midheaven or if it's your ascendant, you will really see something showing up here. So that's as a general rule. Um, and I just keep in mind, I'm keeping this introduction really short because I've already done a video with Bukola, who we had a conversation around the bigger meaning of the eclipses, both the lunar eclipse and the solar eclipse that's coming 2 weeks afterwards. And we're already very much in that energy. I think we have been already for a few weeks. I usually give about a month before an eclipse to really start to notice how things are changing. Certainly a week before the eclipse, you want to pay attention. And this is part of the lunar cycle that began on the 23rd of August. So even this 2 week time zone that we're in terms of the lunar cycle, this is the full moon that began on the 23rd of August, but it's part of the bigger lunar family that I described. And by the way, the ending, the culmination point of that is going to be next summer. And the date there is the third closing square, or the third quarter moon, the third quarter square of this is next summer. That's the 8th of June. And then we have to go another 9 months. And then we go into 2027. The 8th of March will be the closing of this lunar cycle that began on the 10th of March, 2024. So keep in mind the gestation period, or the family of the lunar families, is 3 years in total from beginning to end. And that's again 17 Pisces, 38 arc minutes. And that's the 8th of March, International Women's Day on the 2027, in 2027. Right. And so this particular phase, I'm not going to describe as fully because there's a lot of information in what I spoke about with Bukola. It's a lot of spiritual understanding, even the contextual understanding of our bigger time. And you'll find times to navigate your way around that conversation, but I think it's worth listening to. So we have a ruler of this eclipse in very strong dignity, and this is really, really helpful. So this softens a lot of the energy of the eclipse, or it leads to a very strong potential for good outcome in terms of the themes of what's happening in your life and the area of the chart that this is happening for you. And I'll go sign by sign in a moment. Um, the one challenge is that there can be an exaggeration because that's part of the nature of Rahu, or the North Node, which is now on the moon. And it's also part of the nature of Jupiter. So just because it's in exaltation doesn't mean that it's doing only good things. You have to understand the nature of your own Jupiter to understand that, the nature of your own moon as well to understand how you're going to respond to this, and also the house placement of things, how they're happening. So Jupiter expands. It's going to bring more. It can expand nationalism, for example, in Pisces. And we talk a little bit about, again, with Bukola, we spoke about those things. Um, and so this energy also with the North Node on the moon is potentially going to aggravate emotional or psychological issues for certain people. And that would have to be something that people would tend to be vulnerable to, or if there's something coming up that appears to be a struggle for some people, we just keep checking in on each other, check in and let people know that you're there. Check how they're operating in this time and age, because these are not easy times. And so just notice that. If you're looking at the moon through the lens of the mother or your role as a mother, notice that this can also change. There's something that comes into your awareness, and the moon symbolizes mother and home and homeland and our emotional field and the mind itself. So all of those things will be a part of the story for you. The Pisces moon is quite romantic, can be very idealistic, can be also subject to, again, a sensitivity around emotions or a sensitivity to suffering. And again, this can feel like too much. So even though there's a positive aspect, for some people, it might feel like too much. So it's really important to help yourself by grounding, by coming back to something that is literally real in real life, not real through a video that you're watching, but real feet on the ground, bare feet on the ground. Take a shower. If you're able to go to a large body of water, have a dip in the pool, in the lake, in the ocean, whatever you're able to access. It really does help to ground you and put your body in an awareness of your physical state. Lean against a tree. If you're in an urban environment, just hug a tree, and relate to something that is concrete and real. And this really helps. Eclipses can aggravate the mind, and this is why there's a bit of a challenge, a potential emotionality that's built in, because it's the moon that's being eclipsed. It's our mind, our memory, our relational quality, the relational dynamic that feels that it's challenged. So there can be a big shift, a turnaround in emotions. And that can bring you emotional clarity, by the way. So if you're in a relationship where the dynamic is not very clear, it's good to have a sense of, well, this will really clarify things. So you can see that things can happen in ways that are very enlightening, quite literally. We're talking about Jupiter and an exalted Jupiter as well. So it can bring you some really wonderful clarity around whatever is going on emotionally. And again, I'll go house by house so you can see for the different ascendant signs or sun signs or moon signs, especially because all the moons are somehow related also every time we have these eclipses, just as the sun is. So we have a very strong Mercury also. We have Mercury not only in its own sign in Virgo, right next to the sun, it's really close, it's considered a conjunction at this point, with Mercury under the beams of the sun. So the Mercury is strong in terms of dignity, but weakened by being very close to the sun. What this can do, and also by exaltation, because it's exalted in Virgo, but it's weakened because it's too close to the sun. So that's called sort of burnt by the sun or under the beams of the sun. And what that can do is just mean that we're not necessarily seeing things very clearly, or we're not communicating very clearly. And this is adding to this energy of the dynamic of the North Node on the moon. So having Saturn moving back into Pisces is actually quite welcome because of that. It's grounding. We have Saturn moving away, at least by sign, if not by degree. It's moving away from Neptune as well. So they're not so tightly enmeshed, and Saturn is more coming to its own conclusions, let's say. It's not so idealistic or not too much lack of clarity in terms of what is the righteous thing to do, or how Saturn, in those Saturn ways of being responsible and upstanding and doing the right thing, making the effort in the way that is necessary. And again, I've spoken a lot about the Saturn retrograde back into Pisces, so you can find that in another video. And especially here and now, we're still in this period of time, which is an extended period of time through 2025 and 2026, where Saturn and Neptune are basically conjunct. But it does ease off the conjunction, the fact that Saturn is actually now ruled by Jupiter instead of being ruled by Mars. And especially because at the moment, Mars is not in strong dignity when it's ruling this lunar eclipse. So Mars is still ruling Chiron. It's still ruling Neptune because they're both in Aries, and of course Aries is there as Chiron is backing into Aries. We'll talk more about that in when there's the next conjunction. That's also part of our times. It's a signature for big change, and Mars is about to oppose that as well. We find Black Moon Lilith, where there's an opposition to Chiron as well. Again, there's a theme here about wounding around the relational dynamic or around the image of self, my role in the dynamic of relationships, my sense of belonging or isolation. That's both the Saturn in Pisces as well as the Chiron in Aries, both retrograde at this time. And the fact that it's opposed by Lilith shows that there's something of a degree of dissatisfaction or frustration or annoyance around what is fair and just and balanced in relationship. And we can think of that in terms of the human dynamic because it's not just the one-on-one relational quality, but it's also the quality of justice, human justice. And that's the Venus ruled Libran quality of what is fair, what is right in this grounded 3D experience, and what is honoring the other, let's say. And Mars is not super happy about that because Mars is very individualistic. It's a dynamic energy of what's in it for me, how do I get things done? And when Mars is ruled by Libra, it's always kind of like shunted aside, and it's like, don't forget, you got to think about the other person, you've got to think about the dynamic of the couple, you've got to think about the dynamic of what's right. And although that muffled Mars, when it's considered to be in its detriment or exile because it's usually ruling Aries, much more quick to act, much more confident in its actions, jump first, ask questions later. But in Libra, it slows down the energy of Mars to the point that either it becomes quite open to discussion and diplomacy and working constructively to find a solution that works better often one-on-one than it does collectively. But it also can be that it muffles the tendency to take action or to assert oneself or to show aggression. And so it can actually lead to a kind of a dodgy, certain sort of hidden aggression, a hidden passive aggressive tendency. And we can see that also perhaps expanding because there's now a separating square between Jupiter and Mars that still lingers at the time of this eclipse. And so that square between Jupiter and Mars perfected before the eclipse. And that's something that is either hotly contesting something or exaggerating some frustration or exaggerating a tendency to want to expand something. But in this case, because Jupiter is very dignified, it's very strong, much more ready to do the right thing, let's say, for at least its people, not necessarily what everybody believes is the right thing, but doing right by my people. This is probably going to get the upper hand in terms of the square, and so we can find perhaps a better use of that square, but it can increase aggression, violations of law, violations of what is righteous, again in the context of the bigger picture, perhaps also in the context of your experience of life. So we have Jupiter at 19 degrees of Cancer. So if you have, again, if you go, say, 3 degrees on either side of that, then you're going to find some real affinity to whatever is there in the sign of Cancer with this Jupiter story. And then same thing with the Mars at 20 degrees of Libra, and go 3 degrees on either side of that. 2 degrees if you really want to see results. Tighten the orb when you want to really see something impactful. Um, it's important that people don't retrofit astrology to what they want to see. It happens a lot. I see that a lot where people are like, this is all happening because there's this big orb it's, going to touch this or that. And it's like, no, it doesn't really show up that way. And just because you want it to doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to see the results. And that's why the more specific you are, the more likely you are going to see the results that the potential is carrying. And that's why I think a lot of people get disappointed in astrology because they don't respect the fact that there are limitations. It's not as abstract as pulling a tarot card, for example, where you can kind of interpret your way through the story. It is really because we're looking at something that's degree based and there are certain limits to that. it's better to stick within the limits. And the closer you are to those limits, the more likely you're going to see something really showing up. And that's why I say specifically with the eclipses, look for conjunctions first, and then oppositions, then squares, and the rest is kind of a nice story. It's going to help you, but it's not necessarily going to show up in a way that is like, wow, this is the most memorable thing that started this whole new thing. So Mars is ruled by Venus. Venus is ruled by the sun, which is ruled by this Mercury that is under the beams of the sun. So we have some planets here that need to cooperate, need to kind of figure out how to be on the same page. And so this is also part of the eclipse story, where Venus is trying to go her own way, trying to calculate based on her desires, her motivations, so the relational desire, the wants and needs of the moment, the way to express love, the way to express my preference, the way to express femininity is under the rule of the sun at this point. And so because the sun has no particular dignity in Virgo, it doesn't have any particular strength or weakness in Virgo, but the fact that it's on the south node means that the sun also is it's challenged. It always depletes. It takes away from the energy of the sun. And then the fact that Mercury, which is about the thinking process and how to communicate about that, is also depleted at this time. Again, we're in a phase where we want to be careful not to jump to conclusions, not to make too many choices, to kind of recognize that all of these planets are a little bit uncomfortable. They're a little bit challenged. They could be a little bit exaggerated. There can be a little too much going on here. And this is why it's always better to avoid starting something new, for example, around an eclipse, or launching something. I wouldn't launch anything on this particular energy. It's not entirely clear what the results would be. Um, of course, short-term things, or life goes on. You have to do what you have to do, but so business things or personal things, you want to just maybe give it some space and even leave it until the end of September when we can get out of the eclipse energy altogether. And depending on what you want to do, it can be a wise choice. Certainly, if there's something contractual, this would not necessarily be a good time, especially because of that Mercury being challenged by the sun and the sun itself being challenged by the south node. The two of them will come together on the 13th of September, so within a week, and it happens to be the midpoint between the eclipses, which is also quite powerful. And then the other factor of instability is that the day before the eclipse, which is ruled this Uranus, which is ruled by the same Mercury I've just described, is actually stationing retrograde. So it's adding to a whole lot of instability. So we have Saturn very newly backing into Pisces. We have Uranus just stationing, which means it's very strong. It's kind of not, it's almost standing still at this point, moving very, very slowly. And then that dynamic of Mars not being really raring to go, not being quite ready, not being quite sure how to take action. This energy will shift. So there's maybe a wait and see kind of energy that can be here, although there are a lot of realizations also at this time. The dynamic of relationships can always be part of the expression of a first house, seventh house, meaning an opposition. That's both by the nodes and by the lunar opposition. So that's a kind of a general way of looking at things. When there's an opposition, it's me and the other. For Pisces specifically, this is very true. So this is where we'll start the analysis sign by sign. Again, for more general understanding of this eclipse, go to my video that the recording of the conversation I did with Bukola on Saturday, and listen to that. There's a lot of insight around a bigger picture of the eclipse energy, and that can be really instructive. So let's start with Pisces, because you're usually last, and that's quite a nice way to honor you, Pisces, because this is all about you. And so if you have Pisces sun, moon, or ascendant, especially if you have something within a few degrees of 15 degrees, so bang in the middle of Pisces, this will be something you cannot miss. It's going to be changing your experience of this moment in time and how you're going forward in time, a way of reassessing what's coming up for you in the next few weeks, months, and even up to a year and a half. So be on the lookout for what's happening now in the dynamic of relationships, in the dynamic of where you're going, what you realize about yourself, what you realize about your relationship to your emotional life, to your mind, um, to women in general, because the moon represents elder women, and specifically perhaps your mother, because moon represents mothers as well. Now, what's interesting is that this moon is also in a quincunx to Venus. Venus is the exaltation ruler for Pisces, and the fact that Venus is in the sixth house, also bang in the middle of her sign, I think also plays a role here in terms of the dynamics around perhaps obligations or expectations around whatever is the relational quality of the feminine, in your experience of femininity or the female energy that you carry, regardless of your birth status. Just everyone is carrying a relationship to the feminine energy, the divine feminine, you could call it, and females specifically. Also, this could relate to health because the moon is also about the body in terms of health. The sun represents your constitution, and the moon represents the body and how that, so the mind and body complex, we could call it, and how that might be taking shape. Is there something that Venus, for example, in the sixth house, is inviting you to look into, perhaps of becoming aware of indulgence, overindulgence? This is one of the drawbacks of having such a powerful let's go people Jupiter in the fifth house in its exaltation, which is of course your ruler, your ascendant ruler, your sun ruler, your moon ruler for Pisces. And so Jupiter is really telling us that there could be something that is either expanding your love nature, your nature of abundance through passion, through your creativity, through your self-expression, relational dynamics around children or even pregnancy. Jupiter represents that too, represents parenting and pregnancy as well, especially in Cancer. And that's why it's exalted there as well. And so this whole story might have something to do with checking your capacity to, not over exaggerate. Don't you might find that you are because of overindulgence, because of excess, you might find that there's some issues that come up through your everyday experience, whether it's health issues or potential for, dynamics around blood sugar, for example. That's typical Venus. That's all the story of diabetes, for example. And Venus rules the liver as well, and so that can also be something to reflect on. What am I taking care of myself? Am I looking after myself in that way? And Saturn also going through the first house has been a journey already for over 2.5 years now of taking care of yourself, finding limits for yourself. And this is again the theme because Saturn has only just come back into the first house after being 3 months in your second house. So you're cleaning up and you're kind of reassessing, did I actually get the memo? Did I do the thing that I know in my heart of hearts I need to do? So here's an awareness of that. Because the South Node, Sun, and Mercury are in your seventh house, so lots of energy in the house of the other. This is also part of the bigger story of the eclipse, which is recognizing how you feel in the context of relationship. How is this balance working for you? You have Mars in the eighth house of other people sharing money, stuff, intimacy, working through the more maybe challenging aspects of what you've inherited in family patterns, including family crises or dynamics around maybe the more metaphysical aspects of your life and how you're recognizing something's coming through there. It can be a tense time in terms of relational dynamics. The Mars squaring Jupiter from the fifth house to the eighth house can either it's burning passion and there's a lot of real motivation and interest in the relationship, or there's a recognition that the burning passion is actually self-destructive and it's not working. That would depend on your natal chart, of course, and how this is impacting you. So that's not a general sense. It would have to really be specific on those degrees. But when you have, especially the North Node, and or the eclipse degree by the sun or moon, when it's landing on, for example, your ascendant, but again, sun and moon, that's representing, sun is representing yourself, and your moon is representing your feelings and your, again, body and your nature, and the ascendant is how you're showing up in the world. The descendant is the other, it's the partner, it's the life partner or the business partner, the dynamic of relationship. So if this is really specific to your ascendant descendant degree, this is going to show up specifically in your relational dynamic. And for some of you, it can be that you're realizing that the relationship has expired, it's reached its logical conclusion, not necessarily with any hard feelings. It's just kind of we're moving on now. There's something different. For others of you, you might encounter a dynamic of relationship that feels quite faded. This is part of the eclipse energy that things feel like I didn't do that. And we never do, by the way. We never do the thing that we think we're accomplishing. It's that we're experiencing it, and we realize in retrospect, well, I couldn't have done that if I'd tried. That putting all those pieces together, only the universe could have put me in that place. So you might find yourself actually in a place where you're coming across somebody that becomes extremely interesting as a relationship dynamic, perhaps for business purposes or for marital purposes or for at least in the moment of friendship, especially as Mercury is there, that representing friends as well. Jupiter rules your 10th house, so this also implies how you're engaging in your dynamics for career purposes. And that also can be around the dynamics of your client relations. So maybe there's something there also, which represents how you're revising how you show up for your clients or who you want to show up for. Maybe you need to look into different ways of working with people. Especially as Jupiter is in the fifth house, this is also the house of entrepreneurship. And this is extremely fortuitous because for Pisces, as your ruler is in great dignity in the house of entrepreneurship, creativity, bringing your art or an expression of yourself, expression of your joy, what you love to do, bringing it out. Including babies, why not? Because that can also be that, and children, expanding the lives of your children or something going on there. This is really, really wonderful. It can actually bring some direct benefit. And again, that will depend on the nature of your natal chart. But many, many good things can happen in a personal context. But it's true that an eclipse will bring something to a head just in the same way we've got this full moon cycle, it brings things to a head, and then there's an anti-culmination point. There's a point at which, okay, now we're releasing this energy. It comes to the peak. We're releasing the energy. Again, look back to what did they say? March 10th, 2024, and going forward in time. This is the peak moment to go take us forward in time to March 8th, International Women's Day, 2027. So things happen in the same time frame. There's no sort of actual linear time. So the beginning and ending is happening simultaneously. And so this is what you want to understand even about yourself. If you come to an awareness of yourself, it's like, well, there's part of me that's over and done, and I've recognized this new thing, and that means that I automatically then am shifting into this new phase, this new way of being. And it's a north node eclipse. So even though there's a culmination point, so on one level, on the lunar side, we're done with something, we're completing a cycle, or we're becoming aware that we've done as much as we can in this particular cycle. We're having to release now for this particular cycle. The North Node says, yes, it's going to be new now. It's going to be different. The Rahu on North Node, also called Rahu, is about expansion. It's also about disillusionment or delusion. It comes with a misty, kind of foggy quality. This nefarious potential for making things a little unclear. That's why it's good to sit with these things for a couple of days and not really act or decide. Things might be decided for you. Things will come in the ways that they need to come. But that Rahu energy can also be about foreigners and foreign lands, and Pisces carries that energy too. The stranger, the foreigner, the thing that is foreign to me. So it doesn't even mean that somebody has to have a different passport than you, but it's something that is different compared to what you're already familiar with. And that's also why it can be a little confronting, because it's like, well, this whole new thing that I have to navigate in a way that is very intimate through that moon energy, not really clear what this is. So uh, just bear that in mind. It's going to be something that is going to be probably only revealing itself over time, even if something literally happens on the day, which can also happen. But that would again imply that you have really, really tight orbs of conjunction opposition, or at the very least a square, for something to really be bang on in that moment that is super karmic. And so you just give yourself some space and time to reflect around the time of the eclipse, because the mind representing the moon representing the mind can mean that we are overblowing a situation which otherwise can be easily dealt with, or it can also be over emotionalizing a situation, which can equally be tempest in a teapot, as the saying goes. So I think I've said what I need to say. We still have, of course, this mini grand trine. That's a feature of our times. And so the mini grand trine is still very active now. The distinction is that it's extremely tight because Uranus is also retrograding. They're all moving in the same retrograde direction. This will continue until the end of August, late October, when Neptune finally goes back into Pisces, and then that breaks things up again. And then 7th of November, Uranus will break things up again, even more so that loosens up this mini grand trine as it goes back into Taurus in your third house. So this will be part of the step-by-step changes that we're going through over the course of the last months of the year. I do think this month of September is quite significant. So take note of how you're going through your life, what's coming up in your life. Become aware of where you're really getting excited about something, really fired up about something, super motivated about something. Of course, Pisces also represents our beliefs, our faith. Where am I perhaps changing that? Especially this is in your first house. So can I see where I'm losing faith in myself, or finding a new faith in myself, and how I can work with that? And that can be something really empowering as well, especially as this is all happening for you, Pisces. So keep that in mind over the next few weeks, because this is going to have a long arc of influence, and you can really look back on this time and say, oh, I see how much I've evolved through this period of 2025, going back to 2024, and because, not only because of Saturn being at that point where the moon is today, but also because this is now your maturation of that cycle where Saturn is coming back and kind of giving you another nudge and saying, yeah, do you remember what you intuited was the thing that you had to do? So you're going to do it now. You're going to start to make that change now. So this is the gift of the moon that gives you a realization, an awakening to your own awareness, your consciousness of what is going on here, and enlightening you quite literally. Um, right, and I think I've covered it all for you. Um, yeah, that's it. And especially if you live in Eurasia, but really most of the world is actually going to experience this eclipse in a direct way. I don't recommend that you go and observe the eclipse, but you will experience it in a more sort of visceral, physical way if it's happening over you, and it is happening over Europe, very, very powerfully over sort of Central Europe towards Central Asia, the Middle East, and parts of Africa, and all the way, stretching all the way to Asia. So, yeah, that's a lot of people. That's a lot of people who will experience this eclipse. So we can see in a global way also that this will change a lot of things. All right, I'll leave it at that, Pisces, and all best wishes to you for this eclipse cycle, and I'll see you in the next video. So Aries, Sun, Moon, and Ascendant, you're going to experience this eclipse in the 12th house, which is more of a hidden aspect to your life. It can be very, very connected to your unconscious mind, especially because we're looking at a lunar eclipse. And this will have you perhaps realizing things in an unconscious way, or through intuition or dreams. Perhaps also through a foreigner, because the 12th house represents that, foreigners, foreign lands, faraway places, places that are hidden from us, including our ancestors. Um, and also because we've got that North Node moon happening there that emphasizes that message. So with Jupiter ruling that from the fourth house of your lineage, your family, your homeland, your emotional state, your psychological foundations, what makes you happy. This is actually really lovely for you. The one shifty thing is that your ruler is in the seventh house, where there's some dynamic about relationship where people might be coming at you with some dynamic in the relationship that requires an adjustment, or you might be coming at people, which will be something you need to grapple with in the context of relationships. Neptune is still in your sign, but Saturn has moved back into your 12th house, into Pisces, where it was up until the end of May. So 25th of May, it moved into your sign. So you're going over things with Saturn there in a way that you've already seen in the sort of April, May time of 2025. I have a whole separate video about that, so I invite you to watch that to learn more about that dynamic. But just know that I see this as a helpful stabilizer to an otherwise kind of unstable moment in time. Eclipses are always unstable. The energy is changing and it's unstable. So we're on the precipice of something. There's kind of a switching on and a switching off of energy that happens around eclipse time. So it leads to a certain amount of shifting of awareness makes us kind of stand still. And around eclipse times, like birds are quiet and nature becomes quiet because it's kind of weird. Like, what's happening here? Things are not like they usually are. Something is changing. Um, and, if we look at the moon, I forgot to mention that in the beginning, that everybody's excited about this thing called a blood moon. And the truth is, if you have a lunar eclipse, you have a reddish colored moon. That is the nature of a lunar eclipse, especially a total one. And that's what happens. The moon goes red. So there's no specific reference to some potential violence. Not that not always a potential in our era, but don't get all spooked out about these clickbait headlines that talk about blood moons and things like that. It's just an eclipse. And you have a lot of blessings in the sense that Jupiter is angular, and that always helps because it's good to have strong planets angular. Mars, your ruler, is angular. It's in the fourth house where Jupiter is found. It's in the seventh house where Mars is found. Even if it's in opposition to you, it makes it very strong, and you can work with this energy. That means that there's something here you can actually deal with. You can really work with stuff. Venus is in your fifth house of love and romance and pleasure, finding abundance and happiness, how you express that. So Jupiter is in the house of what do I need to be happy? How do I need to feel secure? What do I need to arrange? All of these things. I would suggest that as Jupiter's ruling this eclipse from your 12, you might need to reassess your relationship to the divine and benefit more from connecting in a very structural way, especially with Saturn there. Can I build a new structure that helps me feel grounded through what I have faith in, through what I believe? Jupiter rules your ninth house as well, of your religion or your faith or the dynamic around your ideals, your ideology. So this is a really good time for you to contemplate those more mysterious aspects of life as well. There might be something around work or colleagues or challenges in that sense that is also happening that's contributing to this story at this time. Um, there's a lot of support for you. I want to keep emphasizing that. But if there is a challenge around work, you want to take this as a very karmic change that there's no sense in sort of struggling with it. It's what you're being given. And this might also come through health. It would depend on your natal chart. That's not going to apply to everybody, but it might come through health issues or needing to take care of somebody else's issues around health, mental health, physical health, work obligations compared to a sense of not wanting to work and realizing that there's a kind of a wishful thinking that's taking you away from responsibility. That's also the dynamic of that Pisces 12th house where we find the eclipse. Um, yeah, so you want to keep yourself kind of grounded and solid. It's the moon that's being eclipsed, is ruling the fourth house where Jupiter is. And so there may be something that is also related specifically to family or your home and household and so on. The moon represents that. Cancer, where Jupiter is, reflects that as well. And that can also mean that there's something that's changing and it may involve a loss. It may involve a letting go of an actual person or a relationship quality or an emotional connection with somebody that involves some kind of letting go. But it's with this kind of energy, it can be felt like a freedom. It's like a feeling of liberation, or feeling of a natural release of something. This also applies because your ruler Mars is in the seventh house. So there may be a change of a dynamic in a relationship, but it feels like this has to happen. It's good for me. I'm moving on, or it's in a natural evolution of the life cycle and it's okay. I can deal with this. So again, don't be afraid. It's not that this is going to happen for everybody, but the 12th house does represent loss. And Mars rules the eighth house of, which is also the endings, house of the longevity. And that can be also something that might be related to the relationship. Is it the longevity of a relationship, or is it the longevity of an actual person? So do obviously for yourself as well, if you're experiencing any psychological or physiological problems with your health, then you recognize that this is a time you can become aware of solutions, because you do get a lot of support from that Jupiter. There's a lot of support coming from Venus herself, in terms of the dynamic of finding happiness, finding a way through happiness. Um, be careful also that if you're entering into a new relationship, that you're also giving it some time to feel real, that you're not going to engage in a relationship that feels impulsive or exciting based on what might end up being a bit of a flash in the pan. Um, you're you're in a space where Uranus is in your third house, also just stationing retrograde, so it's very strong, and that is going to contribute to, potential for rapid thinking, rapid sort of ideas around things, and it's in a very strong sextile to a very freshly entered into your sign Neptune in the same degree of your first house. So there can be some testing of your judgment or your ability to see yourself or your role with other people, or the way people might be projecting onto you with Neptune in the first house. That will have to depend on your natal chart as well, of course, what's being affected by that Neptune. Just kind of coming to all of these different potentials here. Um, yeah, I think I've said enough now for you to grapple with this. But again, think of those dates, think of the timing of the beginning of this cycle going back to March 2024 and ahead to March 2027, and see that we're at the peak moment of this bigger cycle, and see what you can find in resonance to that. All right, Aries, make the most of it. I'll see you in the next video. Taurus, this eclipse is happening in your 11th house, which is actually a really important house in terms of your social life, in terms of your vision for the future, in terms of where you reach out into the world. And as your exaltation ruler, the moon, is up there with the North Node, there's a lot of your emotional baggage or emotional self or emotional desires happening in that area of life. You're thinking a lot about the future at this point. Your ruler, Venus, is in your fourth house, so you're also thinking a lot about your security, um, literal security, or home-based security, or your sense of emotional, psychological security. What do I need to feel happy? What are my desires? And so there's something here that is pulling your attention towards the future, and even more so because Saturn is now there again, as it just moved back on the 1st of September as I'm recording this, move back into your 11th house. And so Saturn is kind of like saying, get serious about your future. Get serious about how you connect socially. Get serious with the things that you envisage for your life. Maybe also with reference to siblings, because Jupiter is in the house of siblings and it's ruling the 11th house, which can represent especially elder siblings, or uncles, and the figures of extended family connections as well. So that's part of that dynamic. Equally, the third house dynamic is also your local space. So there's part of you that is also really focused on that relational quality of your local space. Taurus energy is very strongly linked to friends as family. That's a very Taurian quality. You've got Cancer in your third house. Family, siblings, friends, that's really important. Very influential in your case, and especially now with Jupiter there, and it's influencing your relationship to the sort of collective acquaintances and friends and people you hang out with because of a shared cause, for example. So the moon is being eclipsed there, and what that can represent is that there's some element of a friendship or a dream or a goal that you're being shaken up by. There's a thing that is kind of like, oh, that's what I thought, but it's different now. Different doesn't necessarily mean bad, so it's really important to emphasize that this does not necessarily mean bad things. It just means things are going to have to be different. I'm aware now of something different, or there's a relational dynamic that's changing, and that may be based on something that has to be let go of in terms of an expectation or a vision of the future that you hold, or the relational bond between you and other people. The South Node is in the fifth house, slightly kind of, it's damaging the sun in the sense that it's blocking some of the energy of the sun. And Mercury, which is also with the sun, is under the beams of the sun. So things are, there's a challenge in terms of expressing your your love maybe, or your joy, or your deeper bond. There's something that is, it's challenging, but it's still trinal to your sign. It's also in Virgo, that's an earth sign, which is trine to whether it's your ascendant sun or moon in Taurus. So there is a dynamic here that can have you experiencing things in a way that feels really, really different. Um, that you're recognizing is somehow just right now not very clear, not very functional. So it's anyway, whatever it is, if it's about a passion project or a love project or family project or business project, this is a time to become more aware of perhaps also what you stand to gain through changing something, through your awareness of what needs changing. Saturn is asking you to take responsibility around the area of gains from what you do. It rules your 10th house, it rules your ninth house. Uh, so Saturn is important in terms of how you show up in the world. So perhaps there's something you recognize you need to take responsibility for, and you can play a bigger role in your community, especially with the Jupiter there right now. And then Saturn in the 11th can have you become more recognized as a pillar of the community. Again, that depends on your natal chart, but especially if this is your Saturn return, then that's explicitly that, how you show up for others in the community. Um, Mars is in the sixth house. So there again, as a general rule, this can also represent something to do with health, the dynamic of physical health, the need to work hard to regain health. There's a strength when Mars goes in the sixth house. It's actually quite favorable for literally kind of fighting off illness. But Mars in your sixth house is ruled by Venus. Um, and she's ruled by this slightly damaged sun because of the eclipse, and so our weakened sun, we could say, which is something to keep in mind, because if there's a health challenge, you might have to work harder than usual. Mars in the sixth can also represent inflammation. Um, or if you're employed somewhere, if you're an employee, or if you have employees, people working for you, there may be some tension there. There's some conflict there that has you rethinking aspects of your dynamic between perhaps the balance of power, sort of victim dynamics or martyring dynamics that's possible with the sixth and 12th house. Challenges and obstacles are in the sixth and 12th house. So you're ready to struggle for it. You're ready to work for it. But you might also be recognizing at the same time that you're changing your vision of the goals, the vision that you have for your future, changing a sense of what it is that you're doing this for. Like the struggle was there before and you were up for it, and now it's kind of like, why am I doing this? Um, and of course, I've said many times, as Pluto is in your 10th, that's changing your way of showing up for the world outside your front door. It's changing the way you show up in society, in your career, for example, or in your role as a parent. Uranus in the second house has just stationed retrograde, so just the day before the eclipse, which is almost like saying it's the same day. And so that Uranus is really slow, moving backwards, and creates a really strong emphasis of the trine to Pluto from your second, which is about relating to family, about values, your value, and what you value, money as well, possessions, and so on. And it's in a sextile to Neptune. It's the sextile to Saturn is now weakened, still there by degree, but it's now out of sign and therefore a bit weaker. So there's some really strong dynamic that's changing based on your relationship to your own sense of values and your sense of what you possess and the connection that you have with family and how family supports you. So all of that is changing as well, or how you support your family as well. Jupiter rules your eighth house also of marriage and intimacy, along with the 11th house. And so there's something here that can also be part of that story, although that would have to include planets that represent your eighth house in your natal chart, because in and of itself, it's just kind of a hearkening back. It's not specific to the eighth house of what you share with others or your psychology and so on. So I think that's it, Taurus. I think it's a really interesting time for you to really think big picture, allow things to unfold in a way that you hadn't imagined before. Sometimes Taurus can, like all the fixed signs, can hold on too long to things, including dreams and wishes. I wish things would be better. That's part of the challenge of the Taurus, is because Pisces rules your 11th house. So there can be a lot of kind of wishful thinking about the future that ignores the hard and fast reality of today. I don't think Mars is going to let you do that this time, though. In your sixth house of challenges and obstacles and everyday stuff, how you organize yourself. But think big, think serious about what it is that the future holds and how you need to, in that Mars way, take action based on that, and give it a few days to let things settle in a way that feels more clear in terms of the message of this eclipse for you. So good luck with that, Taurus. I'll see you in the next video. Gemini, you are having this eclipse in your 10th house, which represents how you show up to the world outside your front door, the social status, your career ambitions, your life ambitions, your reputation, good or bad, um, how people might remember you. Um, and that, of course, represents parents or you as a parent, authority figures, your actual career and what's going on there, or your relationship with hierarchy within that context of society or career. And you have the opposite end of this eclipse in your fourth house of home, where we find your ruler, Mercury, a little bit hidden by the sun. It's under the beams of the sun. So you might not be clear for a while of the results of this. You'll find your ruler merging with the sun. It's going to be Cazimi on the 13th of September, which is the midpoint between the eclipses. So extremely important for you, Gemini, to focus on what that means for you going forward in this period of time between the eclipses. And something's changing in terms of the dynamic between your needs, your inner needs, maybe literally physical home. Where do I live? How do I work? Or do I work from home? Or how does that shape up in terms of my career goals or my family goals, my life goals? Jupiter is in the house of family. It's in the house of income. In a very dignified place. It's in its exaltation sign in Cancer, and it's really supporting the energy of this eclipse by trine. So something about your value, your self-worth, your valuables, the things that you bring to the table are really supporting this change and this new thing that you're realizing around your career, especially if this is going to be affecting your midheaven, which is not guaranteed with a Gemini rising, because in a whole sign system, the midheaven will move around depending on your longitude and latitude of birth. It's going to move around the chart, not necessarily in the 10th house, but for many of you, it can be that. Um, And especially if it's representing the sun in that part of your chart as well, because that also represents career. It represents your personal motivations and ambitions. So this is something that can be incredibly memorable for you. It's an angular eclipse, which will anyway bring something that is memorable, but all the more so if there are things aligning with the actual degrees, very close to the degrees of the eclipse. Listen to the introduction for more on that. And of course, you have Uranus in your first house, and it only just stationed retrograde the day before this eclipse. So there's something here which is changing you. You're contemplating how to show up differently, what needs to change in your life. There's an itchiness, there's a motivation for you to change. And certainly that's been the dynamic of the last couple of years as Pluto has been in your ninth house of why am I here? What is life all about? What the heck is going on? What do I believe? What do I have faith in? Politically, religiously, spiritually. Um, yeah, and especially if this also connects with your sun, this might represent the father or father figures to you as well in terms of this awareness or change or recognition of something that has come to a conclusion. It's something that you are bringing to your awareness. It's culminating in the 10th house. You might have had a career goal, for example, and especially now because you've had 4 months of Neptune with Saturn in your 11th house of your vision for your future, or how you contribute out in the world socially in terms of society and the groups of people that you connect with or acquaintances. You might have had a change of heart around that, a little second guessing, is this working for me? It doesn't mean that you've got the wrong plan. It just means that that might now be something you need to reconfigure based on the 10th house obligations, perhaps since Saturn is coming back into the 10th house. So there may be something that you need to take care of. Um, Learn to find that stature or the level of gravitas or the level of responsibility that is required for you to be that thing that you want to be for society. Um, Again, depending on your chart, that will be easier or not so easy for a Gemini ascendant, sun or moon. Sometimes you can take things a little too lightly, and this might be part of the story. It's like now you need to be a little serious. There's something that's compelling you to show up in a way that's a little different. Doesn't mean you can't crack the odd joke or do funny things. That's never going to be far from your style, but it's really about being able to be taken seriously, and if that's how you want to be seen, if you want people to honor you, respect you, this might be what you're recognizing based on this transit of Saturn in the support of this energy through this eclipse. Something about parenting is possible here because we do have um, that Jupiter in your second house. It's ruling the 10th house. The moon represents Jupiter. Jupiter represents the moon. So they're in this beautiful mutual exchange, trinal to the North Node as well as that moon. The trine perfects only 5 hours after the actual eclipse. So this is really supportive of you or either in your role as parent or in the dynamic of your parents or a realization around parenting. And again, that can be applied to being a boss or being a manager or being somebody who becomes more important in terms of stature or at least your awareness of that. Mars is in your fifth house, so there's also a very strong support in terms of your creativity. Mars doesn't operate terribly well in the fifth house because it's a little bit ambiguous around what action to take or how to assert itself. Sometimes the aggression can be a little under the radar, so it becomes passive aggression. Um, be careful of that because that can come at you through a love relationship or through your children, or there may be something that you're throwing at somebody in a way that you would be benefit becoming aware of, especially as this lunar eclipse is happening in your 10th house, which is quite public. It's quite out there. People would tend to see something changing in you, especially if this is close to personal placements. And Jupiter rules your house of marriage as well. So again, this might be something about marital status. Mars in the house of love, working through passion in the dynamic of marriage. That's one thing that can happen. This would have to be already in your natal chart. So this would have to be seen for by degree in your natal chart. but those are possibilities anyway. So it certainly looks like you have an enormous amount of support with Jupiter in the second house in high dignity, ruling the 10th. You have some serious support and blessings. Mercury, once it moves into the heart of the sun, also starts to separate from the sun. It operates a little bit better. So even though it's in exaltation and it's in its own sign, it's a little bit weakened by the fact that it's under the beams. Now it's again in a fourth house, so angular house placement, so that makes it stronger. So it's kind of like mitigated there, but again, it might require a little bit of tiptoeing around things until there's more clarity. And I think you probably find that in the inter eclipse period around the 12th, 13th of September. All right, so enjoy this time. It certainly looks like a personal period of expansion for you, really significant events happening in your life, public life, marital life, parental life. There's certainly something there from family life that is very, very promising for you. And I wish you all the best, Gemini. See you in the next video. Cancer, Sun, Moon, and Ascendant, you have your ruler, the Moon, being eclipsed by the North Node in your ninth house. Saturn is back in the ninth house where it was in at the point that it was in April, May of this year. And so there's an experience, I say we because I'm also Cancer Sun, sorry, Cancer, Moon, and Ascendant. And I have a Pisces stellium in the ninth house, and my Mercury is currently again under the influence of Saturn. There's a lot going on there. My Saturn is where the North Node is at this point. So there's a lot going on there for me. But you might have a personal placement, including potentially the midheaven. If you are, if you've got an ascendant, particularly in Cancer, that could be your midheaven. If it's the sun or the moon that you have in Cancer, then it's the ninth house from you, sign-based whole sign house from you. And so that's representing issues around the father figures, teacher figures, your sense of purpose and your desire to exchange or teach or expand your sense of purpose. It's purpose with a purpose, especially because it's Pisces. So your work has to have meaning for you because Jupiter not only rules your ninth house, but your sixth house as well. So Cancers have to find motivation through meaning in what they do. And it feels like this is part of what is coming to your awareness right now. It's coming to fruition. It's a really auspicious energy for Cancer. It's very auspicious for all the water signs in general because of the favorable dynamics around the eclipse. And even for earth signs to a lesser degree, especially Virgo, but especially for water signs, especially for Cancer and Pisces, you're really getting deep blessings, some real support in change, some real support in a sense of expanding what you do, how you do it, why you do it, who you do it for. This is all part of the dynamic of this eclipse. You might have a sense of a change of relationship to what you have faith in, a change in relationship to your belief system, whether it's spiritual or religious, it's not really the question. It's more what do I believe? How do I live through what I believe? The ninth house is also foreigners, foreign lands, going abroad or traveling abroad with a purpose. Everything in the ninth house has a motivation. It has a purpose. It's one of the Dharma houses, most especially connected to the first house of self. Why am I doing, why am I here? Who am I as I'm going through this life? The fifth house of your sense of motivation and the intellect and what you already know. And then that ninth house of how do I make something of this? Why am I doing what I do? What's my purpose? And what is life all about? What is the purpose of a human life? So this is a really key year for you, key moment in time. And you can learn a lot about yourself in this time with a deep awareness of that. It's a very favorable energy for Pisces. Um, sorry, for Cancer because of the affinity that you have in the sign. So the fact that Jupiter is in your first house, ruled by the moon in the ninth house, and the moon is ruled by Jupiter in your first house. So there's an affinity that's called a mutual exchange that really directly benefits a Cancer, Sun, Moon, or Ascendant. And again, especially those who have points in Pisces in those degrees that I spoke about at the beginning, or if you have points in your first house in Cancer or nearby Sun or Moon around the 16, 17 to, let's say, 21 degree point of Cancer. And that's really significant through the month of September. But especially around this particular time of the eclipse. Now, we also have a square from your first house to the fourth house, a square from Jupiter to Mars, or technically from Mars, now separating in its square to Jupiter. Um, and those are angular placements. We also have Neptune still at the top of your chart. And so what this can do is create a sense of desire that is not yet fulfilled, or there's something that needs to be done, taken action on, based on your sense of what you need to feel secure, whether that's a relationship dynamic or a physical property dynamic, because it can actually literally be about where do I live, the fourth house. But it has a lot to do also with how do I feel? Are my relationships in harmony? Are things working in a way that feels balanced and supportive? So with Mars there may not be that feeling. It may feel a little tenuous. It may not feel exactly solid. Mars, of course, being the ruler of your 10th house, might have you concerned about career choices, again, based on this question of purpose or higher meaning, or teachers and what I know, the things that I teach or the things that I understand. Do I need to learn more? And that Mars in the fourth house might have you feeling like, I'm not sure I feel totally secure in what's going on right now. Or is it about needing to take action directly on in terms of your property? Because Venus is also in your house of personal property. It's income. The second house where Venus is at 15 degrees of Leo is all about um, your possessions, the stuff you own, what you bring to the table, how you contribute financially to your circumstances. Can also be a bit of a drain on your income because Venus might be spending for pleasure, especially in Leo, not being very careful with money, being a little elaborate, exaggerating a little bit. This is also potential when Jupiter is in the first house. It's like, it'll be fine. It's all good. Especially in the trine to the ninth house, there's maybe an element again of exaggeration of something that needs to be borne out in reality. So maybe Mars is part of that whole the cold hard reality, or maybe that third house where things are, in terms of how you relate to the dynamic of exchanges of all kinds, where we find the Sun and Mercury with the South Node at the time of this eclipse. There may be something there that you need to take action on or realize around how you engage with your community, with your siblings, through conversations, through business exchanges, through dialogue, through teaching. Again, it's about more, maybe the dilemma is between the practicality of something in terms of that third house Virgo compared to the more spiritual ideal that you're holding and then you become aware of. And certainly with Neptune in the 10th, now that it's separated from Saturn a little bit, you might be even more aware of things that it was like, well, I wanted this thing, but it's not very realistic. What do I need to do to make it real? So that's all. It's really a question of what do I need to do to make it real? Um, what else can I say about this? I think that's kind of it. We've spoken a lot already about the Uranus transit in your 12th, as it's just entered into your 12th on the 7th of July, and then trining Pluto very, very strongly and sextiling Neptune very, very strongly at the time of this eclipse. Uranus only just stationed retrograde the day before the eclipse, so that was the 6th of September. So it's moving very slowly and it's really strong in that trine to Pluto. So there's something about your eighth house dynamic of family history, family secrets, family or inherited patterns, ancestors, people at a distance. The occult or the more mystery school stuff of life is also highlighted here, and Mars activating the fourth can be a part of that, where there's a realization around something of a um, that has maybe a psychological nature, personal sort of sense of balance and equilibrium that you're starting to try to find, or that you're opening up to new dynamics around thinking, new dynamics around the past of your family, family secrets, and so on. This is an ongoing story, but it might be part of this realization around your purpose or realization around what you have faith in, what you believe. Um, I think that's it, Pisces. Sorry, Cancer. I keep looking at the eclipse. I think that's it for Cancer. It's a very auspicious year, very opportune time to start new things, not at the eclipse itself, but this year. Really use this intuitively. It's easy for you to do that. But when your ruler is eclipsed, there may be a moment where you're not sure what to think or how to manage yourself. Just wait and receive. If you don't stress about it, don't let Mars disrupt your foundations. Don't stress about it. Just receive and intuit, and you'll find your answer that way. Probably not so clear around the actual eclipse time, so better to just kind of retreat a little bit and withdraw a little bit, and especially because Jupiter rules your house of health and healing and day-to-day self-care, especially as it's in your first house, and it's ruling your ninth house of faith and purpose. And fathers also, by the way, father's father figure. I think I might have mentioned that. You can benefit by fasting. I always fast around the time of an eclipse. This year I'll be able to fast the whole day. I'm not always able to fast the whole day, but at the very least around the hours of the eclipse, then you can benefit a lot from fasting. So look at your schedule where your time zone is. You can easily find that online, the timings of the eclipse, and fast. Don't eat, don't drink. Don't speak, just be silent and retreat, a mini retreat into yourself. So good luck with that, Cancer. I'll see you in the next video. Leo, this eclipse is, of course, affecting your sun because all eclipses are connecting the sun and the moon. So this is always very impactful for you. And it happens to be in your eighth house. And that eighth house is in a sort of mysterious part of your chart where we're looking at the psychological state or at your bonding or sharing with others. Place where you might find also a connection to family patterns that you've inherited or family secrets and the dynamic around that. It's a mystical place as well. So there can be something that's quite beneficial in terms of what you're picking up or intuiting around your role and the work that you want to do, because Saturn has only just left your ninth house where we still have Neptune, talking about the sort of vision that you have for your life. Why am I here? What's life all about? What do I need to know about that? And maybe Saturn is going back into the eighth house to master some occult knowledge, or that could be about financial management issues, for example. That's also eighth house stuff, managing money, usually for others, but it can also be what you recognize as needing to be managed in terms of what you share with another, what you receive from a client, for example, how you receive your income from clients, client relationships, from your business. And especially because your ruler, the sun, is in your second house, but it's with the south node and a Mercury that's under the beams of the sun. And so at the time of this eclipse, there may be some confusion around money, or there may be some recognition where you might need to surrender some of what you thought were important values around money, or your own self-worth, or your understanding around that, to a thing that might reveal how you're either being influenced by other people or how you need to be more connected to other people. When Saturn is in the eighth house, often we feel like we're just doing this thing alone, and that's been since March 2023. It can feel quite isolating for a Leo sun, moon, or rising. And so Saturn in the eighth now coming back to reveal or to help reveal what this moon can help you understand might be showing you something where you actually realize how much you've accomplished by yourself, how much you did by yourself. If you have your sun here around the eclipse points, listen to the introduction to know the degrees and how to think about that. This will be very impactful because, of course, the sun, if you are, uh, a Leo sun, sorry, a Pisces sun, but with a Leo ascendant, This will be something that marks you in terms of your identity as well, or your father. Very significant in that eighth house way, something that you're realizing about yourself. If it's your moon, there might be some recognition of the influence that if you're a Leo, say sun or ascendant, and you have a Pisces moon, you might be recognizing something about what is going on in your marriage or in the influence of other people or through the family influence. What are the perhaps psychological patterns that I've inherited from my family, maybe including issues that have to deal with crises or some sudden change. This is the house of needing to take action based on sudden change. So Jupiter is in your 12th house in very strong dignity, and the 12th house might help you in terms of your spiritual connection at this time. If there is some sort of a sense of crisis or something that's going on that is quite spiritual or quite psychological, and you're not quite sure what to make of it, you seem really blessed by this Jupiter in the 12th house in really strong dignity. And that's going to lift you up. It's going to help you move your way through whatever this thing is. It might be financial. There with Jupiter in the 12, even if it's in strong dignity, it suggests that there can be financial loss as well, or loss of faith or loss of something, but that will be something that ultimately works in your favor because Jupiter is really strong. Jupiter rules your 5th house of love and children, your hobbies, what inspires you, what makes you kind of light up, what makes you happy. And when it's in the 12th house, there may be something about either going away at a distance, traveling at a distance, or a desire to retreat a little bit. That can be really, really useful for you if there's any kind of a spiritual crisis or awakening going on, or any kind of a sense of something financial going on. This, again, not necessarily bad stuff. Jupiter rules your 8th house where the eclipse is happening, and that can also represent, the 8th house can represent money that you get from others. So it can be like an inheritance, for example. But in this case, not necessarily coming through a catastrophe, like not really something unexpected, as Jupiter is in the 12th, suggesting endings of some relationship, but it was perhaps either expected or it was perfectly sort of at the end of a well-lived life, and somebody's leaving you money, or it was unexpected in the way that it came through, for example. There may be some desire to travel or learn from foreign influences or connect through foreigners as well, perhaps for some occult knowledge as well. Astrology fits into the 8th house as well as the 9th house, for example. Psychology as well. The 12th house is the house of the unconscious, so Jupiter there also can have you support this understanding or this awareness through dreams and through kind of even sort of lucid dreaming or mystical experiences that you're trying to make sense of now. Don't try and do that through the mind. Do that through an open questioning where you don't already have the answers. Better to let things reveal themselves with the moon occulted in the 8th house. Yeah, this might have an impact on your marriage. Saturn rules your house of marriage. Um, and it's coming back into the 8th. So if there's any questioning around the viability of a marriage, that's something to reflect on as well. You've got Venus in your 1st house, so there's definitely some focus on relational dynamics, but also, and Mars is in your 3rd house where Venus rules the notion of choice. What to do, what decision should I make about this situation? And then Pluto, of course, moved into your 7th house 2 years ago. So the change in the dynamic of your relationship, whether it's a business partner or a marital partner or an important long-term partner, that's a big change right now. This is it's already underway. Now, Uranus is changing the way you see your future. And this dynamic now with Saturn moving back in the 8th could clarify things. So it can either be like, okay, now we get it. We figured out what we need to do, what we need to take action on, how we need to go about this. Or it's, you know what, we realize now we're done. This is the way we want to move on. But either way, for you, Leo, it seems to be favorable. It seems to work in your favor. And of course, that would depend on your natal chart. Venus also rules your 10th house of career, so there's something that you need to contribute to your career, perhaps based on something that seems to be how you work through other people's values, or how you deal with the changing relationship that you might have in terms of the dynamics with clients or the dynamics with income that you get from clients. All of those things are potentials at this time. Okay, Leo, so have a wonderful eclipse season, and I'll see you in the next video. So Virgo, you are very personally affected by this eclipse cycle. All through September is going to be an incredibly important time. And so because it's happening in your sign, there's going to be a strong likelihood that you have a sun very close to this mark, and it may be also your moon and ascendant. And so you're relating now directly, very personally, to this issue of the dynamics in relationship. What are you realizing about relationship? You've had 2.5 years of Saturn going through your seventh house of relationship, and that has taught you a lot about who gets a look in and who doesn't, and who do you want to be in relationship to. Who are you serious about, and who is not worth your time? Establishing perhaps boundaries as well, better boundaries, or a sense of realness around the relationship dynamics, overcoming perhaps some obstacles and difficulties getting to that point. But whoever's still there on your team, let's say when this eclipse is happening with Saturn coming back into the seventh house, whoever is still there by the time Saturn leaves, which will be February next year, you can be sure that they're pretty solid. You've done the homework, let's say, and they've passed the test. Um, and then this eclipse will show you that. It will show you also how you're feeling about things. It'll reveal the impact of the emotion behind your relationships, or perhaps the recognition of the illusion that was behind a relationship that's actually not functioning well. Whatever movement towards or away from a relationship might be going on, it's to your benefit. Jupiter is supporting your house of relationship. Jupiter in the 11th house is exalted in Cancer, and it supports your house of relationship, whether that's your ascendant, sun, or moon relating in that dynamic to the relational quality. Um, and you're going to find the benefit from that trinal aspect from Jupiter, which is in a very nice mutual exchange with the moon. So the moon is ruled by Jupiter, the Jupiter is ruling the moon and trinal to it, trinal to the north node and the moon. So there's something really significant that is supporting you at this point in relationships. That means that, again, as I say, if something changes and the relationship is done, it still works in your favor. So you can trust it and say, okay, I know something better is on the horizon. Something new is coming with that north node in the seventh house. Maybe somebody you've never met before, never imagined before. If this is about a business partnership or dynamic in business, it's possible because you've got Pluto in your sixth in the house of everyday work, and you've got Uranus now newly stationed retrograde just the day before the eclipse in your 10th house of career. And especially because this is very much on your first house, seventh house axis with Uranus in the 10th, I think this could also involve career, or at the very least marital status, social status, this kind of thing. It's still working in your favor. There's something changing. So again, go with what is intuitively guiding you towards this new job, this new relationship, this new dynamic, or away from. It's just no, it's not that anymore. It shouldn't be this. I can trust. You can trust your emotions. um, you're going to be perhaps tested in that emotionally, or maybe you're going to feel a surge of emotions that is actually quite uplifting. Again, that will depend on your own situation. Venus is in the 12th house, and she's ruled by that sun in your first house. So there's something that is in the house of bed pleasures. Venus is the exaltation rule of your seventh, so that can actually bring you a great amount of joy in terms of your intimacy, in terms of what you are working with in terms of the dynamic of the relationship, or perhaps also around income from foreign lands connected to foreign people, because Venus rules your ninth house, as well as your second house of earned income. Well, you still have Jupiter in the 11th house of gains. So a really good time for money. Mars is in your second house. which can also have you spending a lot of money, maybe spending money on relationships, even spending money on family dynamics, spending money on investments potentially as well. Um, and so there's something here about income, possessions, your values, that may be changing as well, or may be influenced by hidden aspects of what you desire. Venus in the 12th. Um, what else to say about that? Your ruler, of course, is in your first sign, so very, very strong, angular in the first house, really strong for you, but it's under the beams, and so there's still something that you're working out, not quite clear on. And the sun itself is with the south node, so there's some depletion of energy that when the south node is close to the sun like that. That's part of the dynamic of the eclipse. It's weakening the luminaries. It's changes like lights on, lights off kind of dynamic. So there's some aspect of yourself that you might be not clear on, where the emotional part is also not clear. So just give it some days, give it some time, or maybe give it the month of September. Your ruler, Mercury, will be Cazimi, so meaning in the heart of the sun on the 13th of September. So that will be a moment of insight and clarity. And that's the midpoint between the eclipses. So especially for you, Virgo, sun, moon, or ascendant, take note of what goes on at that period of time around the 13th. Or it could be 12th, 12th, 13th, depending on where you live, around that point, even to the 14th, again, depending on where you live, because it's no, it couldn't be the 14th. It's going to be either the 12th or the 13th, but it will be at 21 degrees of your sign on, I think globally it'll be the 13th, so you can just adjust for your time zone. So that's quite significant because that's a rebirth of your ruler in your sign. So that's already pretty potent in and of itself. And that's a rebirth following the retrograde cycle when Mercury was retrograde in your 12th house in Leo. And the next retrograde will happen in November. I think in Sagittarius back to Scorpio, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, so we're here with a big uh, change in your life. You are definitely going to notice a change in your life. This is part of this particular cycle that we're in. Listen to the introduction to hear more about details of timing, dates, and other things that you might add more information about, and make the most of this. You will remember it, I promise you, especially if this is happening on your ascendant descendant axis, or your sun particularly strongly, and the moon, and to a certain extent with reference to home, perhaps where you live, the emotional dynamic in relationships. So all the best to you, Virgo, and I'll see you in the next video. And Libra, this eclipse is happening in your 6th house, 12th house axis. So with the moon being eclipsed in your 6th house, there might be something about work or obligations, which has been a big theme for you, especially because Saturn, your exaltation ruler, has been in the 6th house since March 2023. So we're coming back to the same theme. But that dynamic around work, maybe health as well. Health issues could be physical or psychological, or a little more nebulous, especially because Neptune has been there as well. Maybe there's something that is psychosomatic, and it's important to understand that it doesn't mean that it's not real. The symptoms are real, but their cause is more on the energy body level. The cause is emotional or psychological or spiritual. And so this is an opportunity for you to realize, where am I in the right job? Am I doing the right thing? Now, the moon rules your 10th house of career and your sense of your ambition and your aims, including also your social status. So that can also include how you engage with life outside the front door, as it were, or in terms of your marriage potentially as well. So all of this can be really useful information for you to intuit. Do I like what I do? Do I love my job? Am I doing the right thing to be in the right relationship? Am I in the right relationship in terms of the balance of what I contribute to a relationship or not? Mars is in your first house, so you're a little bit bolshy at this time. You might be feeling a little bit more courageous, more ready to assert yourself. Or, on the other hand, you might actually find yourself expressing yourself in ways that are not entirely clear, and they may come across as passive aggressive. You've got Mercury under the beams of the sun in your 12th house on the south node, where you might not be entirely clear actually how you're thinking about these things or how you're communicating. Or there's a need to kind of filter through things and maybe talk to people before you're ready to say what needs to be said or before you're ready to take action, for example. Venus is in your house of the future. That's your ruler in the house, in the 11th house of gains. So it's all looking quite good for you. So you would definitely want to use that Mars energy in your first house to be assertive as opposed to aggressive and step up for yourself. And this moon, being eclipsed in your sixth house is kind of like going, wait a minute, why am I doing this thing again? Why am I doing the same old thing again? And that's part of the victim martyr energy of that Pisces and Virgo dynamic in the sixth and 12th house for Libra, which is quite strong. And one of the reasons that Libra is a bit of a pushover at times, always giving and feeling potentially victimized by doing so. So now with the Mars in your first house, it's an opportunity to kind of say, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not going to take it anymore. Mars is squaring, separating from a square to Jupiter in your 10th house. So you're feeling this sense of self in a confident way, and it shows up because these are angular houses. So Mars is in your first house, really strong, and you've got Jupiter in your 10th house, really strong, and in its own, not only in its happy place, it's exalted up there, but really bringing you some attention from the world outside. So you might have some really good success, new ideas, new opportunities around work based on this, around your career or your sense of vocation. Sixth house is also issues to do with your everyday routines, everyday schedule, the dynamic that supports your health in that sense of, what I do actually has consequences for my physical and mental well-being. And so you're coming to a realization of something. And Saturn there in the sixth house can actually be quite constructive in the sense that, again, it brings you to a place of concretizing. I can make this real. I can make this happen. This has legs now for me. Pluto is changing the way you've been showing up for the last 2 years in the fifth house of self-expression and in romance as well. So that's also really supportive energy. And then in your house of your sense of purpose and the sense of what you have faith in, what you believe in, we've got a very strong, now stationary Uranus, just stationed retrograde the day before the eclipse on the 6th of September. So this is really powerful for you to realize all of these things at this time. There's a connection there between your sense of purpose, and maybe where you're realizing that something is coming at too high a cost. I'm not doing this anymore. Mercury is ruling not only your 12th house, but that 9th house where we find Uranus. So there's something here about what is going to be revealed to you in between the eclipses. So if you go, just wait a few days after the eclipse to notice. If something doesn't happen immediately at the eclipse, it's often not exactly on the same day, but usually within a week or two, you've got a really clear sense of what this represents for you, even before the eclipse. And with Mercury under the beams of the sun, it's going to slowly merge with the sun. So on the 13th, universal time, and it might be the 12th where you live, but it's going to merge with the sun at 21 degrees of your 12th house in Virgo. And that will probably be a moment of clarity, more clarity, a deeper awareness of what all this meant. And that would be wonderful if it does. And then the moon itself will be in its first quarter phase in the sign of Gemini at the same time. So that's actually quite an interesting dynamic as well. So will it be? Will it be? Yes, it will. I think so. Yeah, I have to double check that, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be in Gemini when it comes into it. So it may just eke into Cancer, but I think it must be in Gemini. Right. So I think I've said everything I need to say for you there, Libra. I think we've got it covered. You've got a pretty good opportunity to turn the ship around in a way that makes it feel like I'm ready to do this for the long haul, especially considering this movement of Saturn into your sixth house at the same time as this eclipse. It really matters how you live your life day to day. It's those little day-to-day choices that will bring you to a better place in your life. So really give that a lot of consideration at this time. See you in the next video. Scorpio, Sun, Moon, and Ascendant. This eclipse is happening in your fifth house with reference to children and love and your self-expression, what brings you happiness, how you express that happiness, what makes you tickled. Is it a sport, a hobby, a passion, project? Is it just love? All of this is possible. It seems much more related to the dynamic of your sense of purpose, your self image, or your identity with what you do, because Jupiter is in your ninth house and it's trinal to the fifth. So you're having a strong sense of a bigger meaning to your life, a greater sense of meaning to your life. Now, Mars is in the 12th house, which can also add a layer of spirituality to this dynamic, but it can also be a little bit restless and troublesome in the 12th house, especially as it's your ruler. Mars is not terribly easy in the 12th house anyway, because it operates a little bit under the radar. We're not always sure why we do what we do, why we're motivated in the way we are. So be careful of passive aggressive behavior. Be careful of undermining a good relationship in a way that might feel like you're a bit of a killjoy in terms of the dynamic there. That's not necessarily the case. It's one of the possibilities. And Saturn in the fifth house might be having you kind of come back and explore the nature of love or the dynamic around your romantic life or the dynamic with your children in a way that makes you a little bit more serious. But this is based on information you've already intuited or known from April, May of 2025. This eclipse is really taking you towards a new sense of how you show up for yourself, both in the love dynamic, but also just in the way that you express what you're here to express. Mars, because it's your ruler and it's not really in strong dignity, might have you a little bit confused around what actions to take. Be careful of blaming others if you're not where you want to be. Neptune is in your sixth, and Chiron is also there. So there may be a strong sense of, I'm not really sure how to go forward with things, but you do have an enormous amount of support coming from other directions, especially if you take the high road and operate from a place of spiritual motivation, or at the very least, philosophical motivation with the Jupiter in the ninth house. Connecting you to teachers or people who can really show you something bigger in terms of your experience of life and why you're here and all of those different things. So Venus is in your 10th, so relationships with hierarchy or with your parents or you as a parent can also be very supported. The relationship dynamics in terms of your ambitions as well. There's just the connection with people in the world outside, in terms of your career perhaps, or in terms of your vocation, how people see you out there can also be really beneficial. Pluto, your modern ruler, Pluto is in your fourth. And so that can also be quite compelling in terms of how you need to reestablish a foundation for your life, how you need to understand the shifting sands, let's say, of your psychological foundation or your lineage or what grounds you. That can actually mean literally home as well, the house and home. Big change there, big dynamic, maybe within the home, maybe a big shift. It may not be entirely comfortable. That depends on your natal chart, how that's playing out. Um, and then Uranus is in the eighth house. And so that's also a place where we can see the psychological, emotional connection to the other, intimacy, and so on. So notice that that can be changing. That can actually feel a little disrupted at this time. And there may be a feeling, especially with the sun on the south node and Mercury being under the beams, that you're not really clear of the direction that you're taking in terms of the overall picture of your life. But here's the place to put your attention. You want to feel your way forward based on what brings you joy, what you feel is important to you, what you feel intuitively, what you instinctively feel lights you up. That's really the best way forward. You can establish something really lasting. Venus is the exaltation ruler of your fifth house, where Pisces is. She rules Pisces by exaltation, and Saturn is now moving back in there. And when Saturn moves through, especially towards the end of the cycle, when Saturn leaves the fifth house, often it represents actually accomplishing something lasting based on doing what you love, based on a hobby or passion, or based on something that means something to you philosophically or spiritually. And Jupiter's in your ninth, and so that's certainly part of this year, this whole year story. So that might be something you're becoming aware of, ready to shake things up in terms of how you used to see your future. It's now going to be different from here on in. This is part of the South Node journey anyway through the 11th, but especially now, focus in on that fifth house quality of yourself. And do listen to the introduction because I do mention a few dates that might be helpful in terms of understanding this. So good luck with all this then, Scorpio, and I'll see you in the next video. Sagittarius, your ruler is supporting this eclipse. So you've got Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter, which is in the 8th house in exaltation, and it's also Jupiter that rules this eclipse. So the North Node, the Moon, and Saturn that is now just once again back in your 4th house. So there's an angular influence here, meaning that in your 4th and 10th house, you have a lot of energy, and these are the sort of backbone energies of your chart. And Uranus is in the 7th house, bringing in even more energy into your relational dynamics. So something is changing here, something new coming into the feeling of your perhaps psychological nature or emotional realizations or connection to family and home and homeland and your lineage. Especially as Jupiter is strong in your 8th house, that's also what you inherit from others. There may be an inheritance. It might actually be land, particularly with the moon and the Pisces energy. So you might be realizing, and finally, when I mean realize, I mean in the very literal sense, but it can also be, realizing mentally gains from someone, from an inheritance or a gift that has come through someone, or from profits that come through things that are not the day-to-day work, but like royalties or things that you get from like income that's just kind of on the back burner. Can be very, very lucrative at this time, or it can be also very uplifting in terms of your psychological self, where you feel more kind of okay with what's going on after a period of time of not really feeling okay. So Saturn has been going through your 4th house for 2.5 years. It's not an easy transit, psychologically and emotionally, or even in terms of where you live. And now Saturn is going back in there, but you have the support of your ruler, Jupiter, in great dignity. It's exalted, so it will not be like it was. And this energy now is offering you up a real awareness of what do I actually need to live my life in a happy way, to feel secure, to feel connected, potentially connected to spirit even, connected to something in a way that has greater meaning to me. Yeah, and of course, then the South Node and the Sun in opposition, creating that full moon and lunar eclipse, they're in the 10th house of your career, and Mercury is there as well. There might be something you're realizing also at this time about what you need structurally in your life to a different way of working, a different balance between your career goals or your career requirements and what you need in terms of your true self, your true nature, or your mental health, or your spiritual health, or your physical health. Venus, which rules your 6th house of health and illness, is also in the 9th house of a sense of higher wisdom and understanding or connection to that. She also rules your house of gains, where Mars is at this time, which is about the future. And that might be also part of this dynamic where you're recognizing, now I need to take action based on a future that I want to see realized. And so there's a balance that you're trying to strike here between what brings you comfort, what makes you feel at peace with yourself, or in your day-to-day experience of your inner world, your inner experience of life, whether that be sort of psychological or emotional, and what's required of you in the world outside. So that's changing. Your career ambitions might be kind of like, we're kind of done here. I've done that thing. Don't really want to do that thing anymore. So you're taking yourself to a whole new place in this energy. And it might involve a different relationship to get yourself there. That doesn't have to mean that if you're in a solid relationship that needs to change. Although with Uranus going through the 7th, your relationship dynamic will change. And that doesn't mean you're sacrificing the relationship. It means that, if you're single, for example, you would become married. Or if you are in a dynamic where you don't really communicate with each other, or there's a little bit of restlessness, you find a way to make that stable, to make it more grounded in some way. So Uranus going through the seventh can be challenging because there can be a lot of changeability around relating, around both your own desire nature in terms of relationships, but also the people that you actually relate to. Or the people are very Uranian. They're very different. They might show up in a way that feels very different. Or there's a distance between you and another, and that can also be the meaning of the Saturn in the fourth. Um, that there's a distance in terms of what feels emotionally connected. It's working out for your own good. It's working out in your favor because there's a lot of support from your ruler at this time. So roll with it and make those changes, make those bigger changes, and trust the fact that you're being guided to focus on your personal needs, on your inner experience of life at this time. That might mean quite literally focusing on house and home, your role as a mother, for example, or your connection to your mother, something like that might be part of this bigger story. All right, Sag, so make the most of this. It's a strong opportunity for change for both Sag, Sun and Ascendant, and of course, even for the Moon, but that's coming more through you internally. So all the best, and I'll see you in the next video. Capricorn, your ruler has actually moved back into the same sign where the eclipse is happening in your third house in Pisces. So this is a full moon eclipse with the moon on the north node in your third house of your local space and connecting you to your siblings or the neighbors around you, your everyday busyness, your everyday occupation, the way that you engage in the world around you in your local space, or the way you engage with your local community and your siblings and your cousins and things like that. It's all about learning as well, practical learning. The third house is the mind, and the moon is in the third house, where she's considered to be in her joy. The sun is in the ninth house, where the sun is considered to be in its joy. So this is actually quite interesting, very strong dynamic of that symbolism of trying to understand the dynamic between what you think and feel, how that might be affecting you psychologically or emotionally, how that might change your mind around things, how that might change even your residence, literally, because that also is the moon, how that might affect your relationship dynamic with your father or with siblings. That's also very, very powerful at this time. Mercury is under the beams of the sun in your ninth house, and that's where it's a little bit shaded by the sun. It's blind, it's kind of blocked out by the light of the sun, a bit too close or burnt to the sun. And the sun itself is a little damaged by the south node. So there's something about this relationship to the father that might be a little problematic, or to teachers or to people who act in those capacities, especially because Mars, your exaltation ruler Mars, is in the 10th house, not in strong dignity, and there can be some tension and conflict around bosses, or attention around your career ambitions. For example, what do you want to do with your career? Mars is ruled now by Venus in your eighth house of what you share with another, money that you earn from things that you do or from clients, um, money from other people, or how you benefit from relationship, let's say in a general sense, how you benefit from marriage even. So that's quite supportive in that sense. And Jupiter is in the house of the partner, whether it's a business partner or a marital partner. So things are actually supporting all of this new opportunity for something, new realizations, new ways of thinking, new ways of experiencing connections, new choices, new short-term goals. That's where the North Node is. Be practical about them. Um, that can include other people, especially because the Jupiter is in the seventh, Mars in the 10th, and you've also still got Neptune and Chiron in the fourth. So these are angular houses, and that brings a lot of awareness to the structure of your life and how that's feeling. The third house is also where we have our skills, and you may be starting to realize, or you may already, well, Saturn has made its way through your third house, being realizing what skills you're really working with and what you need to sharpen, what you need to do more of. That might be an awareness of where you're kind of done also with a particular medium, if you're especially an artist, or if you're working with skill set that you've been working with and it's been like 30 years and I'm so done. Now I'm really ready to retire and learn new things, or to move in a different direction or communicate in this different way. The energy of moving into a role of mentorship, for example, or teaching, being very pragmatic, working in a way that's very practical at this time. But because it's Pisces related, it might be more artistic, or it might be related to a sense of being idealistic around that, or highly motivated by a spiritual motivation for what you do every day. Again, it can represent your relationship to early childhood or your siblings as well. So that can be part of this realization as well, or this idea. Because your ruler Saturn is retrograde and it's just freshly back in the third house since the 1st of September, you're coming back over territory you've already gone through, especially around the degree points of April and May. And this is coming right for 5.5 months till February, when Saturn moves back into the fourth house with Neptune. Um, and that'll be Valentine's Day when your ruler moves back into your fourth house. So something is going to be resolved based on your choices. That's third house stuff, based on your communication, based on your local space, your neighboring space. That might have something to do with where you live in terms of that moon dynamic at this eclipse representing home, but also the fourth house later on representing home, where Saturn and Neptune will come back. Pluto is in your house of gains from work, or like your, not the gains, I shouldn't say gain, it's your house of income, earned income, possessions, what you can rely on in terms of your family, or in terms of your income from what you do, possessions, belongings, your values, even. And that's trine now Uranus, which is in your sixth house of everyday work. So your work life is a bit unstable at this time. That will continue, that instability continues until the 7th of November, and then that will be shaken up again as of 26th of April of 2026. That's universal time. And so that is something that is part of this choice, maybe that you're looking at, this new choice. What am I choosing to go forward? So very interesting dynamic here around work, around your obligations, perhaps also around your health. If it's about health, look for how your mind, for example, is part of the problem of your health. Is there too much intellectualizing? Is there too much mental work without physical input, for example? Is there too much overthinking? The third house is the house of mind. It's the house of all of the things that have to do with communication and how we think about things, how we speak, and all of those different dynamics. So, and the moon represents the mind, represents emotions, it represents the field of our awareness of self in terms of our emotional self, our memory, and things like that, where the sun is our consciousness. And when these are eclipsed, there can be something that shakes us up, quite literally, in that sense, a new way of thinking about yourself or your goals and all the rest of the stuff that the third house represents. So that's that. And I think that's it's all supported by a very strong Jupiter in your relational dynamic. So it looks like you'll be able to get help from people. But that Mars up in the 10th house, you have to balance quite delicately. So especially because Mars is strong for you, it's good to remember that diplomacy is the way forward. Even if people are coming at you with challenges, and you still keep your steady keel, and with diplomacy, you'll find much more success, because then Mars moves into its own sign in the third week of September, just after the next eclipse. So a real opportunity for you to come to realizations. And also the Mercury Cazimi with the sun, it's happening in the inter eclipse period. So it's happening around the 13th. of September, and that's a refreshing, a kind of an insight of this ninth house idea of your purpose or your belief, your faith, what you have faith in, the dynamic around all of those things. So, or issues of where am I going in terms of foreign lands, or what do I want to do in terms of faraway places, or a need to travel. Travel is all about the third and ninth house as well. This might be something as practical, let's say, as should I go on that trip, or to what extent am I traveling too much for work, something like that. That becomes a realization. I don't want to do this anymore. Right, so there's so many other things to say. I would need to see your chart, of course, but I will see you in the next video. Aquarius, this time you're last, actually. So we can finish off our video with our look at Aquarius, where this eclipse is happening in your second house of your self-worth, your sense of your values, your value in terms of the output and what you contribute to what you do, how you do it, what you put on the table, as it were, and the support that you get from family and the family themselves, and how you connect in the family dynamic. Um, Even food, the relationship to food might be something that's strongly on your mind, or what you consume overall, including how you might spend money or how you might be working with money, because Jupiter is in your sixth house, which represents issues that you have to contend with every day, and that can invite an awareness of better health and a desire to be more healthy, desire to have a different sense of your everyday experience. Um, Jupiter in the sixth house often means that you're very busy. So that might not be working for you, and you might realize, no, I can't do this anymore. Or especially with Saturn going back in your second house, kind of sensing that you're having to go this route alone, that you have to put in a lot of effort for your income, for your values, for your to build your sense of security around what money you have at your disposal. Venus is in your seventh. She rules your fourth house as well as the ninth house, where Mars is as well. And oh, by the way, and Saturn is your ruler, so that's what makes it even more significant that Saturn is going into in the second house. And Venus is the exaltation ruler to this Saturn and the lunar eclipse that we're talking about. So there's something here about the relational dynamic that can support you in this new realization, or that can actually be part of this new realization. Something that is, generally speaking, quite helpful in terms of the relational dynamic. It's always nice to have Venus in the seventh, because she's helping, she's supporting you through other people. It might be actually literally a woman, or the dynamic of the relationship that is supportive. Could be coming through the marriage, because the sun, which rules your seventh house, is in the eighth house of intimacy, and that describes the marriage and what comes through the marriage. Now, there is something that's a little bit hidden about this. Eclipses are always going to dim the luminaries, the moon and the sun. So there's something in this dynamic of the other and the self, in terms of what you share intimately, or what you share in terms of material stuff, like literally money, or any of those kinds of dynamics. There's something there that is not necessarily going to be clear to you until probably at least a few days after the eclipse. If it doesn't make sense to you around the time of the eclipse, just let it sit for a little bit, because then Mercury will be Cazimi with the sun, meaning in the heart of the sun, coming into a very perfected conjunction with the sun in your eighth house, and that's the 13th of September. Uranus, which is in your house of love, and how you want to be seen, how you get recognition, is uh, very slow at this time, because it just stationed retrograde the day before this eclipse, and it's really strongly in a trine to Pluto. And that's where we find Pluto in your first house of self, where you're showing up differently, whether it's your ascendant or your sun or your moon, especially if you have these early degrees of Aquarius. Let's say up to 3 degrees of Aquarius. This has been a major life change for you already. And then the eclipses are adding in this different sense of your values, your different sense of what money represents to you, what sharing represents to you, what intimacy represents to you. what family represents to you. Um, and then, of course, next July, the nodal axis will shift into your house of self. So this is supporting that shift as you're going forward into July next year. So it's what you're choosing here, what you're understanding here will set you up for support based on what's happening as of next summer in your very personal sector of self. So there's something here about letting go of a dependency perhaps on other people or other people's opinions or other people's expectations, or letting go of a dynamic in a psychological sense in terms of the relationships that you have, or letting go of family patterns that might be holding you back, that might be like either it's a family secret that you might be recognizing, or there's a pattern of behavior that you inherited. The eighth house is about inheritance, but it's everything that you inherit. It's the mannerisms and ways of thinking, the psychological nature, repeating patterns. Um, and because of that south node aspect to the eclipse, and then you're going to have another eclipse here, which I'll do a separate video on the 21st of September. There's something that you're releasing in this area of your life that can connect you to the notion of marriage or the what I've just mentioned above. And this is also the area of the occult, and especially because Mercury is building up a lot of energy here in that house, and then the south node is there, is very karmic. You might be also able to intuit things coming to your awareness. Here we have again that notion of the moon expanding the awareness of something that actually is coming through um, a hidden pattern. It can be psychological, but it can also be spiritual or sort of a magical, mystical kind of occulty kind of quality that can be coming through that then you actually can use in terms of realizing your sense of your values or your even a financial gain. I can make money from this thing because now I'm realizing I already have this talent, this skill, this awareness. Again, because Jupiter is in your sixth house, it can really contribute positively to your everyday kind of work. If this is also potentially, again, about health, mental health, or challenges to mental health, again, that can also be the challenge to the eighth house where the south node is there. It doesn't look too bad in the sense that Mercury is quite strong. It's just that Mercury is a little bit wobbly because of the being under the beams of the sun and sun being on the south node. So there's something that might need to be a little bit of a hump to get over. Your modern ruler, Uranus, is in the fifth house, going backwards into the fourth house. So you've had 7 years of a lot of restructuring around your psychological foundations, your sense of what makes you feel stable in life. And there would have been quite a big shakeup around that, especially now over the last 2 years, while Pluto has been also moving into your first house. So you kind of try to find your legs here as well. And part of what is going to give you that strength of conviction is to realize your values, your own personal value, but your values as well, and operate from that. And Mars is up in your house of the ninth house of your sense of what you believe, what you have faith in, um, your sense of purpose, the motivation for what you do, what gets you out of bed. Can connect you to also issues around your father or father figures, teacher figures. There might be something there that needs to be resolved. We've got a Jupiter square Mars at this time around the eclipse, and so that can also create a certain amount of friction or tension, or it can be even a release of tension in that area where you recognize, no, I'm done here. I don't want to do this thing anymore. I am understanding what I need in my everyday life, and that Mars tension has allowed you to act from this place of your more sort of spiritual guidance or higher wisdom. And then Mars will move into your 10th house of your career or vocation or your social status, and then activate that, make something out of it because it's very strong then once it does that. So I think we've covered all the bases. So the fact that your traditional ruler, which I give more importance to for Aquarius, Saturn is in your second house again for 5.5 months. I think this is really significant. So there will be something that you are noticing specifically you, Aquarius, because although normally an eclipse in the second house doesn't always show up as something hugely dramatic unless you have a personal planet specifically there. When your ruler is there and involved at that time, you'll notice you'll be noticing that. So all the best for this time. Make the most of this opportunity for growth and change. And I'll see you in the next video. And there was something else I wanted to mention in a general sense about this eclipse, and now it's slipping my mind. I thought I better pull this out there and say something about it. So I did for one of the signs mention that the fact that this is a blood moon is not really a big deal because every lunar eclipse goes red. Every time there's an eclipse that obfuscates the moon goes red. It's tinged with red because the light is being blocked. It's being filtered through one of the nodes. That's why the nodes are considered to be these kind of cloudy places that block our view of the light, block the clarity. So that's perhaps one of the things I wanted to say in a very general sense. But there was something else that I missed in the introduction that I wanted everybody to consider. Perhaps I'll check my notes in case I wrote it there. That might make some more sense to me. Yeah, in a general sense, I didn't also mention to everyone that this eclipse is visible through all of Europe, but all of Europe and all of Eurasia, but it's actually gaining in strength as you get closer to the Middle East, Central Europe towards the Middle East, towards Central Asia towards the Middle East, and then towards the Far East. So there's a lot of people in the world, and including Africa, who will see this eclipse. I do recommend that you don't look at this eclipse. I can't remember if I said this in the introduction. Best actually to experience the eclipse, but coming from a place of either sitting outdoors with the eyes closed or gazing down, or in the house or wherever you are and experiencing that way. I tend to refrain from eating during the timing of the eclipse. I might be repeating what I already said. I may have said this only for one sign, so apologies if I've already said this, but I think it's just helpful to see that we're in a period of a pattern disruption, and the moon and the sun have to do with our consciousness and the reflected consciousness, as well as the sun representing constitution and the moon representing the body. So it's a good pattern to disrupt consciously, that we're disrupting our connection to eating, to sustenance, to the way that we're treating our body and mind. And so by fasting, you're making a break. There's a before and after. We're making a break. We're just giving rest to the body. And this is extremely helpful on a subtle body level, but even on a physical body level, and certainly on the mind level. So we're just making a clear break with something coming into a before and after. Um, and this time, because of the timing for me, I'm able to do a whole day fast. I actually start with skipping the evening meal the night before, and I go through the next day and only eat then breakfast the following day. And you can do whatever is possible for you. Look at the timing of the eclipse. You'll find that online and gauge how many hours I've got to do this thing. I think now there's going to be something. As soon as I switch this off, I know I'm going to remember the thing that I wanted to say to you. But there we are. I think I've done what I can, and yeah, the moment has passed apparently. So make the most of this time. It's a very beautiful time for exchanging, having a sense of a refresh, a reset around the patterns of your life that are in these areas of the eclipse. Perhaps I can't remember if I mentioned it in a general sense, but we're going to have the Mercury Cazimi at the midpoint between the eclipses. Oh, right. And now I remember why I wanted to say this. So on the 13th of September, that is Mercury Cazimi, Mercury in the heart of the sun, a regeneration of Mercury, but also a regeneration of our thinking, and all the more so important because that will happen also on the south node. So Mercury ruling this south node. So there's something very special about this month of September. The other thing I wanted to mention, and this has more to do with Indian tradition, but also indirectly with Indian astrology, none of which can be separated from the tradition. This is the very beginning of Pitru Paksha. And in the Indian tradition, every year there is a timing around the new moon that is usually within or September or sometimes early October, the in the nakshatra of Uttarabhadrapada. And when there is the lunation in that sign or in that nakshatra, then that's the beginning of that particular month. And or hang on, it's Purva Bhadrapada. Sorry, Purva Bhadrapada is the nakshatra. The next one is Uttara Bhadrapada. And so this is an opportunity to really deeply spiritualize your connection to ancestors. This is the meaning of the Pitru Paksha. It's 14 days devoted to the ancestors. This is especially helpful if you have difficulties with your ancestral lineage, if you are finding that your life is often dictated by the circumstances of your family. Often we can see that in the natal chart very clearly, particularly if you're born around the time of an eclipse, or if you're born with either the moon or the sun, and especially both on either end of the dynamic of Rahu Ketu. And so you can propitiate the ancestors, honor them, acknowledge them, give them their place. If there have been babies that who have been lost in the family, um, if there have been elders that were lost, to remember them, recognize them, bring them back in, or even people that you didn't know but you know that they're in your lineage, and bring them back in your awareness, honor them in the way that suits you. It can be very helpful to do something on a Saturday. Saturday is the day of the ancestors. It's ruled by Saturn, and you can do something like feeding the crows, or doing some kind of donation to people who need support, who need help. Donate to a teacher, donate to a poor person, or donate to a food bank, for example. A very, very constructive way of using that energy and acknowledging the ancestors as you do that. If there have been terminated pregnancies or lost pregnancies, miscarriages of any kind, or early child deaths in the family, those must be given their place as well. Mark them. Bring them into the fold of the energetic family, mark them. Acknowledge the fact that you are here is because of your ancestors. You wouldn't exist without the ancestors. And this is especially important if you're angry with your ancestors. If you're judging your ancestors, you must try and free yourself from this. And this year, by coincidence, it happens to be exactly in the phase of these two eclipses. It's not normally. So this is just a coincidence where Pitru Paksha happens at 14 days, the time, the period of honoring the ancestors, which is an annual thing, happens to coincide with the eclipses. So this makes it even more significant. So it's a wonderful time to keep that in your awareness. Keep your awareness of the ancestors' importance in your experience and how you got here and how that's influencing your life now. This is why I work that way with astrology. I work with our family patterns. I work with the ancestors and trying to understand how that's still affecting you now. When you honor them, when you recognize that they're there, when you just say thank you without the judgment, without the anger, letting go as much as possible of judging the experiences of what's come before, you will find that you are bringing a clear new space, more harmony, more support from the ancestral lineage that will help you live your life in harmony right now. So, so this is a really wonderful period of time that you can enrich by focusing on the ancestors. You can already do that starting now, but especially from the 7th of September all the way through the 21st. That is the sort of official phase of Pitru Paksha. Pitru means of the father, the lineage, the family, the ancestors, the parents. And so that is the fortnight of the ancestors that we're honoring here at the same time that we're going through these eclipses. So I wish you all the best, reconnecting with yourself and with your ancestors through this eclipse, maybe with your spiritual guides as well, spiritual ancestors as well. Invite them in. And I will see you in the next video. Bye for now.